Hey you guys, I'm going to show you how to create this really cool outline effect in Photoshop. So you're going to start by selecting at least 3 of your dramatic lighting images to create this effect on. So once you have those downloaded, you can follow along with this video. Alright, so here we go. We have a couple things to do before we can dive into actually drawing on the image. The first thing we're going to do is crop our image to 8 by 10. So we're going to select the crop tool from the toolbar. Up in the options panels, we're going to make sure we have width by height by resolution selected, and we're going to set those numbers to 8 inches by 10 inches by 300. And then when you click in the image, you'll get your grid. This is always a great opportunity to achieve rule of thirds. So in this case, it's really ideal to get your model's eye either right along the rule of thirds. So here we're on this rule of thirds line and it's going right through their eye. Or we can zoom in, and it's really great when you can get that eye right on the intersecting point. So, and we have a little bit of wiggle room adjustment here. So I'm going to go with right there. And then double click to crop my image. Command 0 on my keyboard to make my newly cropped image fill my space. All right, so we've got it cropped to 8 by 10 by 300 resolution. And then we're going to edit this to add a little bit of contrast. So we're going to go to curves by clicking on layer adjustments, curves, and here we want to make sure that we have our info showing here so we can see that we're selecting the blackest point and the whitest point. If this is not showing on your screen, you'll go to Window and click on Info. Okay, with our info showing, I've got my black dropper selected, and I'm going to move around my image to find the darkest point. Ideally, the darkest point is about 80 or higher, but I want to find the absolute darkest point. So the spot that I just landed on is 88. That's pretty good. I'm just going to move around a little bit to see if I find anything higher. 87, 88 right there. I'll take that one. So I'm going to click on 88, and then I'm going to select my white dropper, and I want to find the absence of color. So like in this key light is probably a really good spot. So I'm going to do Command plus to zoom in and click on that spot right there, and then Command 0 again to move back out. So I can check my changes here by clicking on the eyeball on the layers panel, and you can already see a really nice boost in contrast. But for what we're working on, we want to make it have a little bit of like a graphic element. So we're also going to adjust this curves line, and in order to see more of that curves window, if you hover right at the separating points, you can drag up to reveal more of this window. So to add contrast, if you grab this line and we move this way, that's going to add a lot of contrast. That would be way too far. If I move down this way, that takes away contrast. So I want to pay attention to which way I'm moving to add contrast. Same with this end of the diagonal. Less contrast, more contrast. But here this is really nice contrast, but I'm losing a lot of my image. So I'm going to bring it back a little bit because I don't want to lose all that detail. So I'm going to bring it back. And then we can also click in like on the line and manipulate it there. And we can have multiple points on the line. So I'm going to go with like right in there. Actually, that's too much. Let's see. So that looks pretty good. All right, so now I've got my background layer, my curves layer. Now I'm ready to start painting on my layer, but I don't want to paint right on my background layer because if I make a mistake, I want to be able to edit that layer independently and not affect my image. So to make a new layer, you can hit the plus sign here. Command Shift N on your keyboard also makes a new layer. If I do a plus, I get just a by default named layer 1. Command Shift N gives me the option to rename it. I'm going to name this layer Outline and hit OK, and then it comes up here. If I wanted to rename my layer 1, I would just double click on it. I can do that as well, and then get rid of one of those. All right, so add a layer either by clicking the plus or Command Shift N, name it Outline, And then to start adding the outlines, we're going to find the brush tool on the toolbar. If yours is hidden, you might have to do a long click and select brush tool. So if it by you only see pencil replacement or mixer, you just need to do a long click on that window and select brush. Up in our options panel, we're going to set the point size or the brush size to somewhere between 4 pixels and 8 pixels, depending on your image and how the effect that you want to create. And then for hardness, we're going to set this between 80 and 100% because we don't want really fluffy edges. We want like a nice crisp edge. So somewhere in here, I can bump this up to like 85. And then some other things to pay attention to up in this options panel is the smoothing. So smoothing is how your lines are interpreted as you add the brush strokes. So I'm going to move this down to 0 and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can really see the effect. So when the smoothing is at 0, if I try to make, oops, and I forgot a really important step. So let's back up a minute. So we need to set this to default. We're going to make this white swatch go on top. Okay. Now with my smoothing at 0, if I try to make a really nice circle, here we go. We can kind of see, that was not very good. It's a little bit wonky, and like if I do like a kind of move my brush really like jaggy, it's going to pick up everything. Then if I move this to 65, when I go to make my circle, it kind of helps to smooth out the edges and doesn't quite capture all the raggedy edges. And so if I try to like do this like jaggedy move, you can see it kind of smooths it out a little bit. So kind of play with that a little bit before you jump in and get started. I prefer a little bit of smoothing on mine because then I can control, I feel like I can make it look a little bit nicer without having to be quite so cautious. All right, so now that I'm ready to begin, I want to make sure over my layers panel, I'm on the outline layer. And then I'm going to start small. So we're going to do Command plus to zoom into the eye because those are the smallest on our image here. And we're going to trace every single detail of our model's face. So you're going to get really focused here. Take your time to make sure your lines connect. If you make a mistake, you can always do Command Z to undo. You can also get the eraser tool and adjust that brush and kind of clean up edges there like that, or get rid of, if you're like, well, that's completely wrong, I can get rid of that whole section and then go back to my brush tool and begin again. So take your time to create really nice lines. The nicer and more detailed you do these, the better they turn out at the end. So take the time to create something really cool. All right, and I'm going to get to work on this. I want to make sure I'm tracing every eyelash, every highlight, every detail that I can in my image. After I'm done doing these really up close details, I can do Command minus to zoom out of my image. So like once I get to like the hair areas and things like that, I'll zoom out and work from afar. All right, so I'm going to get focused on this and you're going to work on yours. Okay, so now that we have all the outlines done, and you might go back and make yours a lot more better than mine. But once you have your outlines done, then you're going to make sure you're still on the outline layer, select your move tool from the toolbar, and we're going to just kind of shift that layer over. So you can play with like either direction. I could pull it this way. I think I prefer it the other way. You can also go left or right or up or down. So kind of play with play with that effect. Something I'm noticing just at quick glance is that I don't want to like put a line over that catch light in her eye right here. So I'm going to pull this back a little bit so that I can see that catch light in there. So I think that looks kind of cool. And then the next step is that we're going to fill in this background. So some options for filling the background. We want to make another new layer so that, again, if we need to make any adjustments, we can right on that layer. And then the shape tool. So down on your toolbar is the shape tool. You can do rectangles, ellipse, triangle, polygon, line, custom shapes. I'd avoid the custom shapes. Those are kind of more like stamps, like a tiger. I don't know. You might be able to create some kind of cool things with it. But you want to make sure that as you're considering what to put in the background, that you are not filling it with something that detracts from the main emphasis and the subject matter of the image, which is your person here. So I feel like if I were to put like a tiger in the background, I feel like that would be so much detail that it would detract from my my model here. So I want to avoid that. So I'm going to get rid of that layer. There we go. The pre-made shapes, of course, you can use the brush to create custom shapes. I'm going to use the polygon tool. I think this one just kind of creates like a neat geometric effect. If you just click one time, you can customize the number of size and the corner radius and things like that. You can even turn it into like a star by changing this percentage here. I'm going to leave it at 5. And then when you click, it's going to give you a polygon. We can, of course, once we're on the move tool, we should be able to resize the polygon as long as we have the show transform controls checked up here. So we can resize it, we can rotate it, we can click back on the polygon and change the fill from, so it's instead of solid white, maybe we change it so that it does not have a fill, but then it has a white outline. And then, of course, we can make this match the point size of the brush strokes that we did on our portrait. So those are some things you can do to customize that. To duplicate this, you can simply drag the polygon to the plus sign to duplicate it. That gives me, now I have 2. So this one, maybe I rotate. I could scale it bigger or smaller. I can play with kind of overlapping. I can do lots of different things there. And then that's really it. So you want to continue your composition to include some custom shapes in the back, or polygons or triangles, or whatever you choose. But that's what you're going to work on to create a whole outlined effect portrait using your dramatic lighting portraits. All right, so I can't wait to see what you create.